Hello, everybody. This is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3, broadcasting out of the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. Also, you can find us on Roku, cable television, X, YouTube, Facebook, and other internet platforms all over the world. And my, oh my, here we are in December and got a lot of neat things. And I just want to share with you that we will have a Christmas show that is 3 hours long. And it'll be a recorded show, but I will have some really great speakers giving 13 minutes of something of a higher love theme. In other words, a really potent message of what they see as a higher love. I am so looking forward to it, and it's going to be some of the people I've had had on the show over the years, a couple of new people, and it's just going to be kind of an all-star program on Christmas Day for 3 hours long. So if you're tired of the family and you want to get into something of a inspirational message, come join us. And so I'm going to bring on our guest today, Rebecca Jeffers. Hey, Rebecca.
Hi, Bart. So good to see you.
Yes, yes. And I'm really looking forward to the show today called Wild, Wise, and Holy, because I was partnering with Rebecca on a tour this summer. Of course, Mary Magdalene France tours. We'll give that a little spot. And she was doing Wild, Wise, and Holy with this group of women, and I was doing the tour as I usually do, and we had this wonderful marriage of counseling, um, discovering the myths that are so important for us to learn, and sewing all of that together. And what an appropriate person to be doing this, as Rebecca is a master therapist, been doing this for a very long time, working with people in one-on-one and group settings and in retreats, uh, just helping them come to a higher grace, a higher knowing through counseling, mythology, and other tools. And Rebecca is the creator of Heart Centered Scripts, Wise Woman Rising Coaching Program. Um, and I guess if I was to say anything about Rebecca in one word, it is caring. That, you know, she was, as I watched her and working with people in this expertise of counseling, there was a just sincerity about her with everybody in the group, and just a higher form of service. So when you have that and you're inspired to do this type of work, it is such a grace. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thank you very much for having me, Bart.
Yes, and we shared a lot about somebody that we both really have a high regard and respect to, and that would be Carissa Pinkola Estes, the author of Women Who Run with Wolves.
Yes.
Probably revived mythology or the myth for women and men to find their path. And that book is what, 20 years old?
Oh, no, it's 92.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
go back in the time machine. However, this book is still relevant today, and it really shows the power of the text. And just maybe in your own words, what is important about mythology?
Well, I had always been drawn to stories, and even before I read Women Who Run with the Wolves, I loved the Greek myths. I remember taking world literature in both high school and in college and just loving the stories. And then when I found Women Who Run with the Wolves, it was like I just found my home, because she brought a psychological element to the interpretation of stories and myths, and that made them more meaningful to me, as opposed to just reading them and kind of looking at the overarching ideas within them. It was really digging deep. And so, and how that pertains to our lives. And so Women Who Run with the Wolves was written in 92, I believe. And you are so correct, Bart, that it is not a dated book. You can pick this book up today. Even if you read it back in the 90s, you can pick it up today, and I promise you that that a sentence that you didn't even pay attention to, 10 years ago or 30 years ago, will jump out at you. So the material is not dated in any way. It's always relevant and fresh, and that to me is like an epic.
It really is. And you bring up this your title. I think it's one of my top 10 titles of 2024 of all the shows I've had on. Wild, wise, and holy. Almost like they're a sequence. And what is this about wild? Because that word comes up a lot in today's uh, higher consciousness vocabulary. What is it to you, wildness?
Well, wildness in the terms of the way that Estes uses it and the way that I use it means coming back to our natural state. So it is not wild as in crazy or undone. It's wild as in natural and free. So the wild woman archetype, which came from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, she calls it the feminine soul. And there is the wild man archetype as well. And author and poet Robert Bly wrote a book that goes into the wild man. Unfortunately, his book is not near as fleshed out and is dated. In other words, he uses dates in his material. And
Mm,
so it's not quite as rich, but it's still on the same general order, and I highly recommend it.
it is
But
good, but
from
it isn't
Yes.
as good as Clarissa's book. I've read them
No.
both,
You
and I
know what
love
I'm
him too.
talking about.
I love
Yes.
him too. We're talking about a book called Iron John by
Iron
Robert
John,
Blah.
yes.
Great book. However, Women Who Runs with Wolves is a masterpiece.
It
You know,
is an epic masterpiece. And so, what is the wild woman archetype? The wild woman archetype is the part of us that is the most essential and essence part of us. It's the part of us that was there before culture and family and drama trauma got a hold of us. That's basically what it is. And so, for many of us, the wildness part of us, which is our instincts, our intuition, our creativity, our ability to be connected to the cycles of life, it's the more fierce part of ourselves, get overlaid with culture and family. What are little girls, sugar and spice and everything nice. There's no wild in that. so many women grow up living out of that very narrow part of being a good girl or a good woman, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's narrow. And so with the wild woman archetype, you open back up to your true instincts as a woman, your intuition, being guided by this inner knowing that we all have. We all have this inside of us. And
yeah,
so Wild Woman connects us to something deeper inside of us.
That's like sugar and spice everything nice. It's almost like following somebody else's plan.
Yes, it is. It is. You know, Joseph Campbell said if you see a path in the woods, it's that's already made. It's not your path. It's somebody
Mm,
else's. You've got to find your own path, and that's really what archetypal psychology and the wild woman archetype is about. Is for women to really flesh out the entirety of who they are, not just the sweetness, which is a wonderful part of us, but also our fierceness, our courage, our intuition, our ability to see things, our ability to know things. So one of the things
mm.
that SD says is that it's not enough to see what you see. You have to be willing to stand what you see. And so the
Say
wild
that again.
woman,
To stand what you
I
see.
will, yeah. So
You got to explain that
it's
a little
not
bit.
enough to see what we see. You have to be willing to stand what you see. So here's how I would describe that is we see what we see. We see something in life that we don't like, like maybe our partner is an alcoholic. And so we see what we see and we look away because we don't
Mm,
like it. And she says you have to be, it's not enough to see what you see, you have to stand it. You have to stand there and actually see it and stay engaged with it. You have to be able to
uh,
stand to see it.
yeah, the word that I wanted to use before you were describing this that I thought you might be missing is confrontation. But I'm glad I did not mention that until now because standing what you see doesn't mean you necessarily have to confront it. You just
No.
have to be certain about the reality what is in front of you.
Yes, I call it accepting reality. I call
Mm,
it, that when you see what you see and you stand it, you accept what is actually happening. And most people don't realize to the extent that they don't want to accept what's happening, how they argue with reality. And
mm,
so the wild woman and then moving into a wise woman, one of the tenets is that you learn to accept reality. It doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you understand it or you agree with it. It doesn't mean that you don't work to change the reality. But in the moment, you do accept that this is indeed what is happening. And being able to accept reality shifts everything for people. Does
it
that make
does.
sense? Yeah.
It does. It does. And be an allowance of it.
Yes.
That's what it is. And your own feelings. Because some of those feelings, if you're living with somebody that isn't really pleasant or is addicted to something that
Mhm.
is frustrating, you're going to have a lot of negative emotions, most likely, as a way to process who you are.
That's very true, Bart. Um, I one of the things that I do in my work is that I really start people with working on. Most people come to me for trauma, and it's usually from childhood or earlier in their life experiences, and I'm talking early adult experiences, not necessarily childhood. They could be dealing with a wounded 30-year-old inside of them. And most people are not connected to their feelings. They don't know how to process their feelings or even how to name what their feelings, because our culture says push it away, deny it, spiritually bypass it, don't be angry. It's bad if you're angry. Don't waste your time on being angry. I go a little bit berserk when I hear that, but um, because anger is very important. It tells people what's going on with them, that there's an injury, where they feel powerless, where they need to look at something. Of course, if people are getting stuck or acting out in those emotions, then that can cause problems. The feeling of anger or any feeling never caused anyone any problem. It's what they do with it that gets them in trouble. So the feeling itself is pure and it
So,
deserves to be looked at. So, part of becoming a wise woman in my program is really being able to own and process our feelings and to say that, I am angry and it's okay that I'm angry. In fact, it makes perfect sense that I'm angry. And so, and even that just changes and shifts things, from acting out anger to, okay, now what can I do? You know,
Sometimes that's resolves it just right there, just acknowledging it, maybe understanding how you created that position in your life, how you've relived it a few times maybe, and all of a sudden it's just like, wow. uh, and there's a cleansing to that.
you're so correct, Bart. Just naming and claiming that this is what I feel, oftentimes that's all we need to do is just acknowledge it.
Yeah,
I have so many people in the beginning, they say, well, how is that going to help me? If I don't get to go do something with my anger. And I said, well, just try it, practice it. Just start
yeah.
saying, I'm angry and I have a right to be angry. In fact, in this circumstance, it makes perfect sense that I'm angry. I ought to be angry at this. And they're always shocked when it's like, oh, that makes them feel so much better. So the wise woman and wise man too. Whenever I say woman, remember there's also these totally corresponding within men as well. And
But it,
remember that in archetypal psychology, masculine and feminine are not about gender at all. They're about energies. They're masculine and feminine
right,
energies, which
right.
are different, but they're not about gender. So
So
these energies get expressed in any gender.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So we're saying wise woman, but we're really more directly saying it's the wise feminine aspects of
Yes.
yourself that both genders really need to develop. Uh,
Absolutely. And the wise masculine as well. Yeah.
yeah. So, um, it's just always so amazing that, you know, in America and in Western culture, particularly on our side of the waters, we both spent a lot of time in Europe. It's quite different because the Americans are very much about present tense and it's about me, whereas the Europeans are more about history. But what I see so much in America and cultures like it is we're lacking that history, that mythology is not exactly history, but it is showing wisdoms that people have learned in the past that are still relevant today that can educate us to something that we may not have in our present tense life. And that's, as I saw the group that you brought into France, they were all hungry for this stuff. You know, they wanted to understand those myths and apply them as if it's been a part missing in their lives. Just how would you have? What's your response to something like that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think that, our culture as Americans is only 240 years old. And so we haven't been around long enough to have much of our own sense of mythology. There's certainly the rugged individual, individualism is an archetype of Americans, but we don't have the indigenous ancestral stories and myths. And remember, a lot of people, when you say myth, they think it means something that's not true. But in our sense, it means myth as a cultural story. So a myth is a big cultural story. Like think of, Odysseus, and his, they make movies out of big cultural stories that have the same similar theme. Star Wars is one of them. And so these big cultural stories tell us where we are in life. And so all cultures have these, and we don't tend to have these. So that's why you see so many people, and I'm included in this, of trying to go back to like where my people came from to find not only the stories and the myths, but the land, you know.
Mm,
Um, the land where my ancestors lived, for the majority of, hundreds and hundreds of years, which for me is going to be northern England, Ireland, Scotland, and Cornwall, that area primarily, maybe some in Brittany. I'm looking into that. So very Celtic in origin. And so there are many, many ancestral myths and stories around the Celtic, culture that I can begin to access. But as Americans, we literally have to do that because we don't have it for ourselves.
Indeed, and we're not so much told that anymore with all of these stories.
No, we're
uh,
not.
with that, and I just keep going back to the American Indian myths and stories, because whether you're American Indian or not, you're still part of the culture because you are living
Yes,
on American Indian land. That is the oldest archetype here, and it, as Carl Jung said, that is what Americans should be trying to understand within themselves, because when they're here, they're a part of it. It just invisibly goes into your bones, so to speak.
it does. And that's how archetypes come to us. They come to us through the land and through the stories that came from the land and the people who lived on the land. And yes, we are living on the land that is steeped in so much lore and such beautiful, mythology and spirituality. And so, yes, understanding that leads us back home for sure.
It does.
Hmm.
We're really close to the intermediate point, and I would like for you to just think of a myth that you would like to share, something about what that's what. We've been talking about the ideology. Let's get into the practical aspects and why a particular myth is important to you. I know you have bunches of them. Uh, so you think about where you want to guide this next. I want to tell everybody that you are listening to Rebecca Jeffers from RebeccaJeffers.com, or www on front of that. Uh, Master therapist, creator of Heartwork Scripts, Wise Women Rising coaching program. And today's subject is Wild, Wise, and Holy. My name is Bart Sharp, and you're on Becoming Quantum Conscious on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3 out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Also on Roku, X, Facebook, YouTube, Spreaker, and other internet programs. Uh, Becca,
Yes.
can you share with us a good myth and why this is works for people?
Sure. I think what I'd like to do is share the story that I shared in France that um, had you invite me on this program because you loved it. And so this is a story from the book Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and it's really one of her kind of flagship stories. And so it is said that somewhere in the desert, the spirit of women and wolves meet. And this is the story of La Loba. She lives in a place that everyone knows, but few have ever seen. And as in the fairy tales of Eastern Europe, she seems to wait for lost or wandering people to find her place. She is circumspect, often hairy, always fat, and she especially wishes to evade most company. She's a crower and a cackler, and she generally has more animal sounds than human ones. And they say she lives among the red granite slopes of Tarahumara Indian Territory. And yet some are sure she's buried outside Phoenix near a well, while others, would just swear they've seen her riding shotgun with truckers to Maria, Mexico. She is known by many, many names: the Gatherer, the Bone Woman, and La Loba, the Wolf Woman. The sole purpose of La Loba is gathering the bones. Her cave is filled with all manner of desert creatures, especially those that are in danger of being lost to the world. The crow, the rattlesnake, the deer, but her specialty is wolves. La Loba sifts and crawls to the dry riverbeds and the mountains looking for wolf bones. She gathers all of them in her basket, and when she has every bone, she sits by her fire and she lays out the beautiful white sculpture of the wolf all the way down to the tiniest little tailbone. And when it's all complete, she sits back by the fire and she thinks about what song she will now sing. And when she's ready, La Loba rises over the wolf skeleton and she begins to sing. And she sings and she sings. And La Loba sings so deeply that the floor of the desert begins to shake. And as she sings, suddenly the wolf creature begins to flesh and fur covers the skeleton. And still La Loba sings, and the wolf creature begins to breathe. And then suddenly the wolf creature opens its eyes and runs free towards the horizon. And somewhere in its running, whether by the speed of its running or by the way the moonlight or the sunlight hit it just right, the wolf is suddenly transformed into a laughing, smiling woman who runs free towards the sunset. And she has long blonde and brown and black and red and gray hair, and she sings and dances her way through the family. So that's the story of La Loba. And it is said if you are very lucky and most definitely lost and tired, and you are in the desert, you may run into La Loba, and La Loba may show you something, something of your soul. So La
Mhm.
Loba is a resurrection story. La Loba is about gathering the bones, whatever those are. They could be your traumas, they could be your lost innocence, your lost creativity, the loss you accrued just living life. You gather those bones and then you sing, which SD says is to pour soul over the things that you have lost, that you've gathered back to you. You sing over those and slowly you begin to come back alive, which is what the wild woman archetype truly does for women. She reanimates us from deep within, where we're living soulfully and not just like the puppet, getting on the treadmill doing what we're supposed to do every day. We begin to live with more soul and more connection.
Yes, and that it has so many great aspects because it's so much about, to me, when I interpret it, is that when you come to a place that you courageously have gone to the end to
Yes.
find who you are, to find what your wounds or your traumas actually happened, but more importantly, what they mean to you.
Mm-hmm.
How they served you, how they've hurt you. And it's almost like you come to a place of nakedness,
Yes.
bottomness sometimes, uh, where you're really open. Maybe that's when
I
she
totally
appears.
agree with you. Yes. I mean, you're a bundle of bones, you know? lost in the desert oftentimes. And so we don't know who we are, where we are, what we are. You know, some things can happen, and and so we go looking for ourselves. And really, the book Women Who Run with the Wolves is a book of stories that each one is a different bone, so to speak. Each story works with a different part of ourselves to flesh it back out, to bring you, and as you said, to make it meaningful. That's what happened for me. I had done lots of therapy and lots of family of origin work and inner child work when I found Women Who Run with the Wolves, and suddenly it all made meaning for me. It
Mm.
made my journey meaningful, which before it really hadn't been. It was more of just trying to get better, get healed, yeah, so that I could, didn't have to feel the way I feel. And all of a sudden, the sufferings, the pain, the hurt, what seemed like disasters became like, oh, well, now I understand, that what I got from that, and there's this resilience that comes out of the wild woman, that Esty says that what wild women do is they go on. And she doesn't mean endure as in put up with, she means endure as we go on. We
So,
keep going.
so would that be to add to that until we find the rebirth?
Well, I think the rebirth comes with that. I think that we're always birthing new parts of ourselves,
Mm.
but we go on. And so if you go on, you're going to have rebirth. I
Mm.
was sharing with a client the other day who's gone through catastrophic loss. And I said, that when you cut like a rose bush, we'll take that as an example, and it's diseased, and you cut parts of it off, you cut the diseased parts off, it starts growing back, but it grows back wonky. It's not the same beautiful shape that it was, but it's still living. And so that's what the wild woman archetype and looking for her to me is, that we find that, yes, we have broken parts in us and we've grown back wonky, but we're still growing. We keep coming back. That rose bush comes back and eventually it's beautiful again. It more than likely will never be the same shape that it was originally. It's a new shape. And so those of us who've gone through catastrophic loss or abuse or traumas, um, life events, we keep going. We endure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I can think of my own life and also people that I've known, people I've worked with. Um, there's a certain people that they always feel like they're misplaced or that they haven't found what that is that can give them gratitude of why they're here.
Mhm.
And there's so much into their wound, and they keep working and working, and they've done tremendous amount of introspection and work, but yet they haven't made that crossover to where they go, wow, I really am beautiful. I do have love in my soul. And it feels like it's finally nourishing me. Uh, that type of crossover. And I think sometimes when you do something like a book like this or mythology, or there are other magical ways to do it, it kind of pushes you over.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something, it's almost like coded words. As you said that story, it's real clear that you just weren't telling the story. You were you were singing a ritual
Mhm.
and bringing the audience through all of that, all of your passion, all of the emotions that have resolved within you seem to get to be part of that story and your resolution.
Absolutely. And I think, for me, Dr. Estes says, you can't really tell a story unless you've lived a story. And
Hmm.
so I've lived La Loba's story over and over and over in my life. And so I feel that every time I tell it. And I think when people hear it, just as when I heard it the first time, it resonates. And this is why story and ritual and breath work and things that bring people to another level besides talk therapy or just working on their wounds, that it brings them to something new. And a lot of times that's what it takes to pull people to a different level in their healing journey.
It certainly is. And there's so many ways that that opens up with people. Although with mythology, it has a very exact intention to do that.
It
Uh,
does. These
it,
stories were written as teaching tales. They were written to activate this archetypal energy within you, um, because they carry the energy that is always embedded in these motifs, these metaphors are embedded within us, within the collective unconscious, as Jung would say, which is why we resonate with them.
hmm,
SD says when women hear the words women and wolves together, that something magical happens within them. And it's very true. For a lot
I
of women, this is true. Hmm.
totally agree with you.
Yes.
I remember when I first heard that title, I just, I keep thinking of a female therapist that my former wife had a close relationship with professionally. I just get that image of that woman running like a wolf in a very fierce way, like because she was totally on board as her lifetime mission to be that wolf that had that type of fierceness and courage to run fully. They're not just trotting; they are friggin' running and
Oh, yeah.
howling and
Hmm.
whoa.
Yeah. And they also sit and breathe together, and they're not worrying about what just happened. They're just right there breathing, and they have cycles, and that's what made her write this book, was that she noticed the cycles that they lived in, the cycles of of playing, of resting, of family bonding, and we have cycles, and we try, Americans try and live in one, and it's go,
Yeah,
go, 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 and then fall in the bed at night and rest, and then get up in the morning and go, 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 go. We don't pay attention to cycles of what's of our bodies, of our psyche, what is needed. And when we start coming back to that, to having more of a sense of cycles in our life, we begin to feel more connected to ourselves.
indeed. And I just speculate this, but when we start to live that life, certain things start to drop away, like excessive watching of television
Hmm.
or stimming on the internet incessantly.
Yes. Scrolling.
Uh, but really starting to go, well, I'm supposed to be living this adventure of wild, wise, and holy. And how do I apply that to my children and my husband or wife? How do I apply it
Yes.
in my own alone inner time? And to me, the big word that pops up in that is creativity.
Yes. Yes,
You know,
creativity is a huge part of what gets lost when we lose the wild part of ourselves. And think of all the little artists, that get told like you can't make a living, doing that, and get pushed into something else. I mean, and that that happens. The artists, the writers, the poet, the singers, they it's like that needs to get pushed aside. And so there's very few of the ones who actually end up using that to make a living with it. But there are so many out there that are, they're they're living lives of quiet desperation because their creativity got covered over by culture, by family, by necessity, sometimes of survival. Yeah.
But also a judgment that if you have a talent like that, you're supposed to define it by how much money you can make off of it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think that's one of the big judgments with that, which as a myth isn't about judgment. It's a story to more awaken to your own personal fire.
Absolutely.
That's not so much judgment, but it's just like this just is. This is being.
Right.
Yeah. So is there another mythology or mythological story that might be fun to share that we could
Well,
explore?
I don't have another one to tell, but I wanted to. I'd love to talk about the holy,
Yes.
and how that brought me, to Mary Magdalene, and how Mary Magdalene brought me to, what I call the holy woman archetype, which would be more in line with what we call the medicine woman or the priestess. I call it the holy woman. So for me, Mary Magdalene came to me when I was in the depths of deep grief, and I had kind of lost access to wild woman. I wouldn't say I'd lost access to my wise woman part of me, that full grown adult self, but I felt really numb. And so coming to France on your tour and being in the power places. And so what I'm realizing is that power places in the world, places of land that have energy, that people have been there, have worshiped there, have gathered there. I think for me, the first time that I really felt this on the tour was at that big, huge fertility stone that we sat on,
Oh, yeah.
up in the woods. I mean, that it was not only visually stunning, and it's so massive in size, but when we, laid back on it and almost in like a birthing position, I felt something opening up in me, and I now know that to be that archetypal energy of that fertility stone. And think about how many people have gathered around that stone for one reason or another, to worship, to pray, to meditate, to ask, to cry, to hurt over, to beg for, who knows what all, and the energy that our group brought there contributed to that. So it's so important that we keep going to these energy sites to keep the energy alive in these places. But that energy was just so amazing to me. And I really got the sense of Mary Magdalene having walked the land in southern Europe and southern France. I mean, and how she was connecting to the even older divine feminine that's there. Because I
Mm.
truly believe that the feminine has been venerated in that part of the world for, probably thousands of years, long before Mary Magdalene even.
I totally agree with you. And I would like to add with that because for some, to go to a power spot in France or in a distant land might not be something you can do. However, for me, when I first started awakening, it was going out into a nearby forest in Austin, Texas,
Yes.
and sitting in a creek near a specific tree and the forest around me. And time after time, I would sit there and just be present with the vibrations. And I was doing energetic activations. You could do it with prayer, you could do it with Reiki, you could do it with a lot of things. But there was an intimacy with something that was greater than me. We could
Absolutely.
call
I'm
it
doing it
a
in my
higher power.
backyard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's available all the time. And
It's
where,
available. Yes.
yes, and where Rebecca describes is a fabulous place. We call it Kookaloo. Anybody who knows the area uh, can identify it. Out in the middle of the woods, a big round rock or a big indention that is round, circular, that is very cosmic. Um, Hard to define, hard to explain, but it opened everybody in the group um, in some unique way.
Mm-hmm.
And what it all holds in common is that it's very connected with a higher power, feminine power, something of the earth, could be of the stars as well. But we're looking beyond us, we're looking beyond our stories.
And we have to. I mean, we're supposed to. We know by, Stonehenge, and I just read a story about a Stonehenge type dolmen that was found in Spain that was uncovered through the drought, and
Wow.
it's like 7,000 years old, whereas Stonehenge is like 3,000 years old. I mean, that's mind boggling. And it lines up with the summer solstice. So they, our ancestors, were very connected to the stars, to the heavens. It was magical, just as female bodies were magical because they created life. This was before they understood, how that happened. They thought female bodies just created life, and so they were venerated. So these power spots are so important to activate archetypal energy, but it's activated, as you said, through nature, through chanting, through prayer, through meditation, through music, through dancing, through plant medicine, through breath work. There are so many ways to activate archetypal energy. And I believe, and others of my teachers do as well, that archetypal energy is the most healing energy that is available to us. And so when we were all laying against that stone, we were being steeped in archetypal energy. And it's the energy and the essence of place, everything that had happened in that place, we were soaking up. And actually, every footstep you take on any land, you're soaking up what happened. As you said earlier, for us, we're soaking up Native American, indigenous wisdom. We're soaking up our ancestors who bled and died, for this land and for this country. I think the first time that I felt a sense of place that I can really remember was when I went to Gettysburg as a 10-year-old, and I
Hmm.
felt it. I mean, I felt it. And then at 17, I visited Stonehenge, and I felt it. I was keenly aware that I was on hallowed ground. But the truth is that all ground is hallowed. Something has taken place, and others have been here
Yeah.
before us.
But some of those places are so strong and they vibrate your body so strongly, your mind kind of becomes subservient. You quit thinking so much and you start feeling, and the mind starts to learn what these hallowed vibrations are like. The mind wants to make everything so easy and efficient so it can become very habituated to work, our typical recreations, our typical interactions, our typical foods that we eat, because that's
Yes.
all what the nervous system or the neurological synaptic patterns want us to do, follow patterns. And mythology, archetypes, sacred grounds shake us up.
They do, and that's why I say, for me, going to those really sacred sites and power spots, like the Black Madonnas are the same way. They're just vibrating and send like a radio station, just beaming out, energy to us. That if you have a chance to do that, I highly recommend it. But if you don't or you can't do that, then certainly what you talked about of sitting in the, just sitting in nature brings you a taste of that.
Exactly. It's all around us. We are graced
Yes.
with a wonderful planet that vibrates an intensity that is beyond us. We're not talking about a religion here, we're talking about a vibrational reality, and more importantly, an opportunity that
Yes.
you can get away from your normal life by practicing these things, which is what you do with Wise Women Rising coaching is teach people how to learn what their body feels like.
Hmm.
It's
Yes, and how to be, comfortable in their own skin. Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes that's breaking down the stories which we get habituated to jump to fear or to jump to anger or
Hmm.
suspicion or judgment, as opposed
Hmm.
to curiosity, what our greater self has to offer.
Yeah, and but until you can accept that angry, hurt part of you, you probably won't be able to get to the other. Not
Exactly.
with any consistency. And so that's why it's so important we have to heal the inner. And as I see it, most of my work is about strengthening the ego container. And like people go, what? Because everything says, oh, you need to get rid of your ego. You got to let your ego die. Well, you can't, an ego that is wounded is not going to die. It's not going to step back. It is not going to go anywhere. And so, strengthening psychotherapy is really about helping people strengthen their ego container. In other words, learning how about their feelings, how to set boundaries, how to know who they are with some clarity. And then the ego is strengthened, as in healthy, and a healthy ego you can step back from. Yeah, and
Yes.
it'll let you.
Yes.
But
It's not.
a
It's not going to
wounded
be
ego won't let you step back. Yeah.
exactly. Those wounded egos always have to be sugar or like babied, and a strong ego can be detached. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Uh, wow. So we're coming to the end of our show, and Rebecca, if you just think about what parting wisdom you'd like to share with everybody. And I'm going to tell everybody that you are listening to Rebecca Jeffers at www.rebeccajeffers.com, and that's Jeffers. And she is a master therapist, creator of Heart Work Scripts, Wise Women Rising Coaching Program, Wise No, Wild, Wise, and Holy is our title today, which I totally love. My name is Bart Sharp, and this is Becoming Quantum Conscious. And you are on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3 out of New Orleans. And Rebecca, what words of wisdom do you have to share with everybody? It's a parting gift.
My parting gift would be to find a story that really speaks to you. To find a fairy tale or a myth. And there's women who run with the wolves. There's so many teachers out there who work with stories and fairy tales, but find one that really speaks to you. And it may be your favorite fairy tale or story from your childhood. Oftentimes, if you do a little research, you'll find that someone has worked archetypally with the story that you love. And I would say work with La Loba, resurrect yourself, gather the bones, put them together, breathe life over them, sing your song over them, and become whole again so that you can be free. I will never forget, Bart. One time I had led several women who run with the wolf study groups. And this was about 3 months later. And one of the ladies who'd been in the group called me, and she was crying and laughing at the same time, and she said, Rebecca, she said, I found my song. And
Hmm.
so she was working with that story, because I remember she said, what if you don't know what your song is? Because La Loba sits back by the fire and she thinks about what song she will sing. And this woman was very concerned that she would not be able to figure out the song for her to sing. And 3 months later, she calls me, I found my song. That's beautiful.
It is, and it's your
Yes,
song. It's very
yes,
much you. Uh, what a beautiful thing. It's almost like holding a diamond inside of yourself that is yours to enjoy.
absolutely, Bart.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I hope everybody comes back next week. And I wish everybody a great day. And we'll see you later. Bye bye.
Bye bye, Bart.